Thanks so much for listening. Before getting into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know that I would love to add value to you, your organization, and those you serve through speaking, training, professional development, or coaching. Over the last year, I've been fortunate to work with those in higher education, pre-K-12, and more recently, the corporate space. To learn more, visit my website at cjleadership.com or send me an email at chris@cjleadership.com. I can't wait to hear from you, and now on to our episode. Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place, because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. All right, welcome back, friends, to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. As always, so glad you're taking time out of your busy schedule to develop yourself as a leader, which we know ultimately helps those you serve. Today, very excited. I know this is going to be a great time, not only for me, but those listening. We are joined by Dr. Danielle Dennis. Dr. Dennis is currently the Dean of the University of Rhode Island, Feinstein College of Education, and serves as Professor of Literacy, Teacher Education, and Policy. Dr. Dennis previously designed and coordinated an undergraduate urban teacher residency program and served as the principal investigator for the Department of Education Investments in Innovation grant to study the efficacy of the Urban Teachers Residency Partnership Program. In addition to recently completing a term on the ILA Board of Directors, Dr. Dennis served as a chair of the Policy and Legislative Committee for the Literacy Research Association and a member of the AACTE Clinical Practice Commission. Dr. Dennis is also a director of the National Center for Clinical Practice in Educator Preparation, which I am proud to share is how we connected. And so, Danielle, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks so much for having me today.
Well, hey, thank you for taking the time. As I mentioned, one of the many things that I like about being in higher education, certainly those of us with a background in teacher education, is how we network. Typically, somebody that's in Western Kansas would not necessarily connect with somebody in Rhode Island, but we have through our work on the National Center for Clinical Practice in Educator Preparation. We've done what I think is some really important, impactful work there, and through that we've met each other. Also through accreditation work, if I'm not mistaken, correct? We've done some of that as well. So
That's
Danielle,
right.
let's just get started. I know you're still somewhat recently new to the dean position, and so why don't we just start with telling our listeners who you are and maybe a little bit about your leadership journey, which has resulted now in being the dean of a college of education.
Sure. Happy to. So I started my career probably just like you in this K-12 system. I was a middle school teacher and an elementary school teacher. Had one of the coolest jobs on the planet when I lived in Duluth, Minnesota. I was a science specialist at an environmental education theme school. So we got to have science on a cart outside all year long. So I then, while I was in Minnesota, I earned my master's degree in environmental education and science education, and then taught out in Denver for a little while, and went back for my PhD. So I've been in a faculty role now for about 20 years, which seems wild. But my faculty role, I took on various leadership roles as a faculty member. Whether that was program development or coordination. I served as chair of our faculty policy council, leadership in national organizations, as you mentioned. So I think I've always kind of stepped into leadership, whether it was through an official title or not, but just trying to, you know, um, think about ways to develop and sustain work that was happening at the university level. And all of that just kind of led me to this, right? So after 12 years at my previous institution, it just felt like it was time to take a different step. I was both personally and professionally ready, and so had the opportunity to step into the role of director of the School of Education at the University of Rhode Island. Um, Not too long after that, our dean stepped down without a lot of warning, and so the provost said, "Hey, you maybe should consider being the interim dean." So I was, and was then named permanent after a year or so.
Well, wonderful. And I always tell our guests, it says a lot about who you are personally, professionally, and what your colleagues and campus think of you when the provost comes and says, "Do you want to think about this?" I know some people when they talk about their initial entry to formal leadership as a chair, sometimes they feel like maybe that wasn't that was more of an invitation because I always say you were the only one around on Friday afternoon when the dean came looking, right? But
Mhm.
no, I that's a great compliment. And so let's start there, um, because while I have never served as an interim leader, I know many people who have. I know it takes great courage. I know it's probably somewhat of a balancing act, especially if you go into it with the understanding that you could be a candidate for the permanent job. Uh, Talk about that, and maybe what would some advice be if we have listeners who are ever approached about serving in an interim role, be it chair, dean, provost, or maybe they're currently in that role and could use some advice.
Sure. So if you don't mind, I'll share a little bit just about my experience because it was interesting. So the provost that appointed me as interim retired a few months afterwards, right? And we had nearly all new leadership at the highest levels at the University of Rhode Island. So we had a new provost, well, actually an interim provost, and then a new provost, and a brand new president. And so there was a lot of change happening, even if they weren't facilitating it. You know, when you have that much leadership change, everything feels different. And so I went into it really, I knew I was interim, but I guess I didn't want to treat it as though I was temporary, because I felt like the college needed to be placed in a position that was equal to the other colleges on campus, given that we had so much new leadership. And so I really tried to approach it as though I was the dean, and thinking about the health of our organization, our college, and how I could best drive that, whether I was going to be the one there long term or not. And I guess that kind of leads into the advice I would have, which is, you know, the thing about being interim is that right, it may be temporary, it may not be permanent, and you as an individual may not want it to be, right? You may want to to come in and have just a set period of time, um, but you're still responsible for the people that you're leading, and the decisions you make in that time are going to impact them long term. You know, and so I just think that when you go in, it's not something to sort of be feared that you might not be the one chosen as permanent, because I think if you don't feel comfortable sharing your ideas, then it may not be the right place for you to take on that role. It doesn't just magically happen that once you become permanent, all of a sudden you can share those ideas that you kept secret as an interim, right? And so that's just kind of how I approached it, and I think it worked for me, both from a leadership of the faculty and staff in the college trusting me to make some bold moves when the time was right, but also the upper administration in the university feeling that they could trust me to work in the best interest of the the larger university as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So I am curious, and obviously one of your strengths is ability to navigate change and see others through that. So again, asking for some advice for our listeners, you obviously, from what you described, there was change at every level. It sounds safe to say.
Hmm.
And I always think no matter what position we serve in, no matter how high up we go the ladder, if you want to use that analogy, we are always serving in the middle of something, right? There's always someone
That's
we
right.
answer to, and also then those that we primarily serve and lead. So what were some lessons that you learned, or maybe some strategies? Because it's clear, Danielle, from what you described, you have great leadership acumen, obviously can develop relationships. I love what you touched on is, the title might be temporary, but your impact and your relationships are not. Those, even in an interim year, the people that show up to work every day still still need leadership. They still need growth.
That's
And I'm
right.
so glad you said that. That takes a lot of courage. So as you had, it sounds like change at the presidential level, provost level, I'm sure there were maybe some, related or what I would call auxiliary positions that also maybe change behind the scenes.
Mhm,
How did you navigate that? And
mhm,
um, what was your messaging like? Because I'm sure that causes a lot of maybe fear of the unknown. And as you know, I always say, with the absence of facts or the truth, the best story
mhm,
wins.
mhm.
And so, how did you navigate that? Because you obviously did a great job.
Well, thank you. So, I it's cliche, but communication is key, right? I don't think you can ever over communicate. And I just really tried to make a point to say, here's what I know, here's the direction we're heading, and here's what I think it's going to mean in this moment. That might change. But I'll come back and share again, and try to create as many possible touch points for the faculty and staff and students, so that they know that I'm accessible, right? So doors always open unless I'm in a meeting. They hear from me every Monday through a Monday memo. We have open door coffee hours once a month. I meet individually with every member of staff and faculty, at least once a year, but I try to do a couple times. And I just want people to know that I'm there and I'm working for them, and that I may not have all the answers, and I definitely won't get it right all the time. but I'll be honest about that. If I made a decision and it didn't work out the way we thought it would, I have no problem owning that, because I'd rather us try something and it not work than not give something a go and never know whether it's the right thing for us. So you know, th- that's kind of how I approach things. We so we had a lot of change in our college over the last 18 months. When I was interim, I went to the president because I felt like it was the right time to say, we are right now spread. Our college was spread across two campuses. We had one unit that essentially it wasn't functioning, right? It wasn't viable given the amount of resources that we were provided. And I just said, you know, President Parlage, this is what I think needs to happen. I think we need to be a standalone college of education. We need to be on the main campus in Kingston, and I'd like to move our faculty and staff who are on the other campus over. And I really think that this is in the right interest of both the college and the university. And he he believed in the plan. Right? So as an interim dean, I started that process with our faculty and staff, and they, thankfully they kept me on in the permanent role, because that would have been chaotic. But that's what we did, right? So over the course of about a year, we moved everybody over, which was challenging, right? People had been on our other campus for 20 years in some cases, and we were moving them, and so that required a lot of really, I would say, sensitive communication, because in a lot of ways, identities were being transformed. And so it again was a matter of, let's make sure we're having as many open conversations as possible, and that people are hearing directly from me, so that hopefully that rumor mill doesn't grow too large. I couldn't just always escape it, right? Because sometimes things just get out ahead of you. But I tried to to help people feel more secure in what was happening. And last year was our first year as a standalone college of education, and now that we're in year two, I feel like we're in a really good place, right? People feel safe. Um, Not everyone's happy with their commute because in some cases it's a bit longer than it was, but beyond things like that, I feel like people are comfortable, and the unrest that we felt in the change is not nearly as alive as it was. And I think that's because we tried to stay on top of the communication, and just tried to remember that these individuals are people that have ties, real ties to their places of employment, and we need to honor that.
I did not know that. This is a wonderful case study, Danielle. Because those, whether you are in higher education or understand K-12 like Danielle and I do, um, in K-12 it's a big thing if I change your plan period by 7 minutes. Higher education, most of us, even with experience, get a little anxiety if I have to go to a faculty member and say, I'm moving your office down the hall.
Mhm.
To use the analogy from a book, you moved the cheese quite a bit, right? I mean,
It-
you
there's a lot of
physically
cheese moving.
physically, um, wow. So talk a little bit about maybe, and I know again, you could write a book on this, maybe you should, but from a 30,000 foot view, how did you go about doing that? Because I know for a fact you had to cast the vision. You had to have many conversations. You probably had some people that weren't on board. Maybe they still aren't. You maybe had some that weren't at first, but now understand that maybe life looks a little different and they have different opportunities. So how did you go about that? Because that's just not a change in structure. They physically, where they live professionally, they, put a for sale sign in their old office and packed a U-Haul and came to the new place, right? So how did that look? How'd you go about that?
So, once it had gone through the channels of the president and provost and all of that, the first thing I did was hold an all college meeting where I laid out the plan, and gave opportunities for people to ask questions. Although there weren't a lot of questions right away. There was a fair bit of, I think fair number of people were somewhat stunned by what was happening. It did involve a, a couple of people who were not retained, and so I did have individual conversations with those people first, so that they were aware, both of what the larger conversation was going to be, but the fact that they would not be retained at the university. And then that's when I went on sort of the tour, if you will, those individual meetings, where we packed them into just a couple of weeks so that there wasn't too much time for some people to have opportunity to communicate with me and others not to. And so we started with that. At that point, we didn't know exactly what the timeline was. We did we didn't know we didn't have space on the main campus, mind you. So we didn't know where we were going either. But we just kind of had a general sense of what the plan was and what was happening. And after that, I just tried my best to keep people updated as I learned more. And if it felt like a lot of time was going by without an update, I would even just update with, I don't have any more information right now, but I want you to know we're still working on things, and please, if you have questions or concerns, just contact me and I'm happy to meet with you. So that they didn't I didn't want people feeling like there was a lot going on behind the scenes that they weren't privy to. And in some ways there were logistical things happening, but not big life-changing things kind of thing. And so that's sort of how we approached it. And it was pretty crazy because it's a lot of paperwork and university processes that have to happen as well. And we have a pretty small team, and so trying to like navigate the systems while also trying to support the people was pretty challenging. But again, I feel like we're in a good place now, and I think broadly speaking, people are happy, and that is a result of just consistent communication throughout the entire time. And again, I didn't always get it right. And I tried to own it when I didn't, because the thing I just kept in mind was like, I'm responsible for the people, right? That's my job. The systems and the paperwork we can do, right? That they might be a pain because sometimes they are, but those things we can do. But I'm responsible for the people, and keeping that in mind, particularly when all the moves were happening, and kind of more broadly at the university, they're thinking about the space and what space needs to move to where. Whereas, I'm thinking, yes, but the person in that space, are they going to be able to take their favorite chair? Is there going to be space for things like that? Are they going to have walls to put what they have on their walls now, or are they going to be in a hoteling location? And how do I communicate that? And are people going to be working remotely, and how will people feel if they know someone who works remotely and they don't work I mean, and so it was kind of that consistent, just here's what we know. If you want to keep that chair, we'll move it over and we'll figure out a way to get it into a space for you. But just understand that might not happen right away because we don't even know exactly what our space is. And so I'm kind of going on, but that's really just kind of how it had to happen. And it felt like a whirlwind at times, and other times it felt like it was going at a snail's pace. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, well, we're never actually moving," and then all of a sudden we moved, right? So yeah, it feels kind of wild that that all happened now that I'm saying it out loud. So
Oh, this is so great, Danielle. And I mean that. I said it. This is a perfect case study. And in this, if you unpack this, there are so many great leadership nuggets, right? Is people over places, realizing, and if someone's listening to this that isn't familiar with higher ed, it's unlikely, but if they are, those things matter.
mhm,
Okay, those things matter. We get attached to, well, my old office is really close to the copier and the coffee pot, right?
that's
Um,
right.
my old office is my preferred parking spot is it makes it really close, and I
Mhm.
like the outline because my favorite picture can be go here, um, and it's so great that you understood that those are the things that help solidify that relationship, that send a message that I'm aware. I can't promise anything, but I'm
Yeah,
aware, right? No different than when we were little. We wanted to have our favorite, seriously, right? Our favorite
yeah,
blanket, our favorite. It means a lot to people,
yeah.
and I think that's so wonderful that you focused on, or that you shared with us, the importance of, this isn't just a change that we're looking at on an org chart. This just isn't new architectural designs, whatever. These are people that we're changing where they live. We might be changing, maybe for the last 10 years, their office neighbor was their best friend. And
Hmm.
now maybe they're next to someone that they don't know, or maybe in the past, who knows, maybe they had a little issue with. We don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of like a new seating chart in middle school, right?
That's right.
is, is sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, so what have you learned from a culture climate standpoint? What were some things that I know are benefits if somebody is listening in a similar position? Were there some positive unintended consequences of doing this that supported or maybe gave new direction or life to your overall culture, climate, and core values?
Yeah. So there were a few things. One one thing we tried, and I feel like it worked, is instead of thinking about a mission and vision, we decided to consider an ethos, something that would stay alive with us. And that was something that we worked on with faculty and staff. And I wish I could recite it off the top of my head, but ultimately it's really talking about partnership, collegiality, care, and joy. Those are the words that stand out to me in this ethos, that's what we want to be, right? And so for me, that's the thing that like I kept trying to come back to when things were feeling very turbulent. How are we or aren't we creating an environment that is collegial, caring, full of joy, and developing partnerships. And so, we definitely in the heat of it all, there were moments where I realized we have lost this. Like I have lost the plot with this, and I need to come back to it. And so that's something that we actually did at the start of this academic year. We brought the ethos back to everyone and said, we agreed upon this as we were in the middle of significant change, and we want to talk as a whole college about what does this look like to us in action. And I feel like it was sort of in that moment where we realized we're going to be okay. That yes, last year was tough, and change was really scary, for people. But I think because we tried to keep communication open and we listened to people who shared with us their concerns, that we were able to make some shifts in our approach and really focus on that ethos, and the piece that all of those words matter to me, but I just love that the word joy is in there because I want people to feel joy. And it's higher ed. We're not going to feel it all the time every day because there are some pain points, right? But I want people to be able to step back after a week or after a month and be able to point out moments of joy in their professional space. And so if we can foster that, I feel like we can really grow as a college community. And so that's one thing that worked for us, not kind of having this very corporate mission vision, but an ethos that lives with us, and is dynamic. So.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. That at on a day-to-day level, while please note, especially if there are presidents listening, we need strategic plans. We really
Yeah, exactly.
we need mission statements, vision. Yes,
Hmm.
those are all important. Um, but just like from a culture climate standpoint, yes, we need schoolhouses that have all the things that an elementary school has. But what
Hmm.
really dictates how it feels to live there each and every day are what you said, Danielle, are the ethos.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that your guiding factors, your North Star, and you could kind of feel when you were maybe swaying away, is it all comes back to the partnerships, collegiality, care, and joy. And I also like that last one
Hmm.
because I think we need to realize it is called work for a reason,
Hmm.
but we have to have some level of joy in what we do,
Yeah.
because it is, well, let's put it this way, whatever we feel is contagious, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so if we focus on joy, um, we're probably gonna see more of it. It's like my
Yeah.
buddy Darren Peppert always says when he does leadership training. And if Darren, if you're listening, thank you for listening. Is, if I tell you to go home and pay attention to red cars, you're going to see a lot of red cars.
Hmm.
And so,
Great point.
so thank you for pointing that out. Wow, this time it has flown by, and I do like to keep these somewhat manageable for our listeners. So we probably need to have Danielle back. Um, I guess as we kind of hit the end here, Where are you at with this? What's on the horizon? What are some things from a leadership standpoint, culture standpoint, that you're focusing on now as you continue to do what's clearly a great job as the dean of the Feinstein College of Education up at University of Rhode Island?
So one of the things we're really focused on this year is letting the dust settle, which
Okay.
doesn't mean we're not working and moving forward, but it means like all of this change. Let's let people like work within it now, right? Because it was like I keep using the word turbulent, but that's the best word I could think of. And so we put new programs forward during this whole time, like four new programs, and you know people really are excited about those. So let's give people the space to work within them. So that was one thing that we focused on. We are going through our state accreditation this year because why wouldn't we be? Timing wise, right? So people have a lot on their plates, getting ready for that, and trying to create structures in our college that take some of the administrative burden off of faculty. There's important content pieces that only faculty can be part of, but there are admin pieces that we can certainly do more work around so that they aren't having to do that. And we're trying to find that space there. But personally, I know one of the questions you kind of shared with me ahead of time is like advice for other people in this space, and to like how do you generate your own development. And that question was really important to me, because I think the biggest advice I can give is to slow down sometimes, right? It can be so overwhelming to be in leadership roles in higher education, in K-12 as well. It's not only higher ed, but because there's so much going on all the time, and there's decisions to be made, and people who need you, yesterday. And but I feel like unless we slow down and create some boundaries for ourselves, we can't be the best leader, because there's too much in our brains, and too much going on, and we have to make some space for ourselves and our thoughts, so that we can reflect on how to be a stronger leader.
List leaders out there, go ahead and rewind that if you will. What she said, take care of yourself first. You have to set boundaries for yourself, and then also allow those you serve to do that. But that I know it sounds cliche, but if you're, we get nervous when our cell phone battery gets down to 60%.
That's
Um,
right.
when you get below 80%, you need to recharge. Because you can't serve others. And I think with the best of advice, certainly newer leaders, maybe just like a first year teacher,
Mhm.
um, takes work home until 10 o'clock at night, and a good principal will tell them it's okay to leave it in the classroom. Leaders, yes, while you're always, Danielle is always the dean of her college, right? No matter where
That's
she's at.
right.
But I think she touched on it there sometimes to say I'm done working. I need to set some boundaries, and then I promise you come back even better and ready to serve after you've recharged. Danielle, this is great. Obviously, you're doing a wonderful job up there. What you have done and what you continue to do, I hope more leaders, more future leaders in higher ed. I hope they learn that story. Maybe even reach out and ask you for some input, because if you're
Yeah,
listening right
please.
now, she's done it all. She, in addition to just reorganizing on paper, which is still very difficult, she did that through physically moving people as well. And then, oh, by the way, we had to create some new programs, a little thing in our world called accreditation, which is very important. So in higher ed, that's like five major life events all at once. So that's a lot to take on in and of themselves. It takes strong leadership, and really kudos to you for navigating that, and clearly coming out on the other side better for it. And it sounds like you obviously have some great momentum. So Danielle, thank you so much. for taking time to meet with us today. And before we sign off, any final, I guess, thoughts, words of wisdom, or advice for our listeners?
So I really recommend a book, and it's called The Cathedral Within. It's written by Bill Shore, and it has been instrumental in the way I think about leadership. It's about how the masons who would build historic cathedrals were rarely alive to see the finished product, right? And so they were building them for the next generation. And it's a tip of the hat to servant leadership, but it's just a really powerful way to think about why we do what we do and who it's really for.
Hey, check that book out. I will try to put the link. I assume it's pretty accessible on Amazon. I will put
Yeah.
that link in our show notes. That is certainly on my list. If you're like me, I have a note app that I try to get to as many of those books as I can. So thank you again, Dr. Danielle Dennis, currently the dean of the University of Rhode Island, Feinstein College of Education, and professor of literacy, teacher education, and policy. Really appreciate you being with us today. Know it added value to our listeners and ultimately those they serve. So, as always, friends, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Wish you well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.